Now if you've watched any of my other movies, you'll know that the wheel hoe is one of my favourite garden tools. This particular wheel hoe I inherited from my father. I really have no idea how old it is, but I do actually recall when I was a child when he actually made these handles for it. The previous handles had started to fall apart, and he made these handles out of western red cedar. They've been kept under cover, they've lasted really well and still standing and working quite well. Now recently I inherited this portion of a wheel hoe, the main working part, from my father-in-law, and the difference between this, apart from the fact that it hasn't seen as much use, is that it has the attachments for cutting weeds, weed cutting blades, whereas this one has a plough. It's really good for running furrows and for hilling and that type of work. These weed cutters are great to go up between your rows. Now these particular ones are an adjustable type. They do unfortunately sometimes miss up the middle and take a little bit of extra work. Depends how well they're adjusted and how sharp they are. But Hoss, who make new wheel hoes currently, do sell an oscillating weed cutter, and I may actually get one of those and put on this. The advantage of these over the oscillating hoe is that these are adjustable width-wise, whereas with the oscillating hoe you have to choose a width that you're going to use and you're stuck with that. But the project today is to make some new handles for this because it didn't come with handles. So I've taken a template of these old handles, these existing handles, onto this piece of wood. This is a piece of poplar. I'm using poplar because I have quite a stock of it, and I've also used it in other projects and found it really quite tough. It's also extremely lightweight, so really good in that way. I think once it's done up with some linseed oil, it should last fairly well. May not last quite as well as the western red cedar, but it will be kept under cover. So I'm going to clamp this up and cut it down the middle. You'll see on the end here that I have marked the handle piece so that I'll have to cut around that with a jigsaw. I'm using these wood vices that I made out of pipe clamps, and we'll see how they work. It's the first time since I finished these that I've actually used them for a job. And it's nice to have something that actually will hold it in place and allow me to cut along the middle. Okay, so there's two rough cut handles. What remains to be done now is to smooth this up so that it's comfortable to work with. This design is really good for pushing. It's what I've always used. There is another handle design for wheel hoes which has a curved down handle, but this one to me seems like the ideal in terms of the fact that what you're doing is pushing, and you need something really well to push on, a nice straight drive down to the wheel. So with the aid of the belt sander and the router, I've got these handles starting to look a bit more like handles and not just rough cut pieces of wood. However, there's still some imperfections and some sharp points around where your hands would work that need to be cleaned up. So a little bit of work with the wood rasp and also a bit of sandpaper. My main area of interest is in the area that my hands are going to be, to get that nice and smooth. That's where you're really going to feel it. The rest of the handle, not so important. It's nice and smooth up here where your hands are. You'll be happy. Yeah. They're really starting to feel good, like something that I could use and push now. Okay, next thing, get some holes for where it's going to attach, and also a system to keep it apart. Now the old one here, you'll see, has a piece of wood across and a twist of wire to hold it together. This simply sits in to holes. This keeps the force on. That stops when you're pushing it apart. Well, it does come apart, you'll see, because this wire is right down here and is not that good in holding it together. So I'm thinking to use a piece of threaded rod across, which I believe will keep it together much better. My father used to use this in this way, where he could actually put a bucket into here and put his seeds, etc. on it when he went to the garden. I'm very close to my garden from my shed, so I don't really need to do that. Now I'm taking these bolts out so that I can mark the location of these holes, how far down I need to come. I'll do them both the same. There's a little area for adjustment here. But I just need to get an idea how far I can push this down. And this is where you need 3 hands. So I'm coming down about 300 to where I'll put this threaded rod through. Measure twice, cut once. That's what my father always told me, and it's a good rule. Before putting this together, now that I've drilled the holes, I'm going to get the rub with some linseed oil. Just feed it a little bit, protect the handles from the weather. Now that they have been oiled, I can start assembling it. The bolts that came with it were not long enough, so I'm using some other bolts, and I'm hoping these are going to work. That's starting to look more like a wheel hub. Now, put this piece of threaded rod through, see how this idea works. I'm going to try and use a nut each side of the wood. Okay, I have a problem here in that these handles have a little bit of angle to them, and of course this is straight. So I'm going to need to drill this a little and twist the hole so that it will go through. So now, that's much better. Now, of course, before I push it through, I have to put all the bolts and nuts into place. It's going to be a bit of screwing to get that one through. Threading it across. A nut washer and a nut on that side, and then I can do it all up and cut the excess off. Right, yes, that seems like a very good idea. That will tighten up nice and firm. That's lovely and rigid. A little bit too low, so I need to adjust that a bit higher down here. Right, that feels really good now, and all that remains now is to find some good weather to actually give it a try out in the field and see how well it works.
I've been itching for a fine day to give this wheel hoe a try since I made these handles. I have made a couple of small modifications. I did change the bolts here. The ones that I had were simply not good enough. I kept stripping the threads when I tightened them up. And because it's built with a square on the inside on the metal, I was able to use a wood bolt where the square fits into that, and you're just tightening up the nut and not having to worry about holding it. So that works really nice and is really tidy. At the other end here, I did change the nut on the outside to a nylock nut, so it's not going to be coming loose on me, and it's a little bit smoother too. So that's a couple of small changes. These blades, I'm going to be interested to see how they work. This particular one is rather worn looking, and I suspect that it's been broken and welded here at some stage. It's got a rather odd angle to it. I did sharpen them up, so let's see how they go.